Hey, what's up guys? John here. We all know Joe Biden wants to bring down housing costs. At least that's what he says. He has an affordable housing plan. Well, how is he going to bring down housing costs right now? I'm going to tell you. It's this new thing that they're pushing, this end all evictions. And they want to end evictions without payment of rent. What is this going to look like for a landlord? I talked about this before. I said I wouldn't buy a rental property today. They gave it to me 30% off if the deal was I had to hold it for 3 years. The reason being is not so much the valuation. It's really, I don't know what the rules of the game are going to be. The rules are getting rewritten right now. And the only way you're going to be able to win the game is by knowing all the rules. Like I would have never ever been able to predict this situation right here. 2 years ago, we all remember the Black Lives Matter protest, right? Well, now what we're seeing here is we're seeing the front page of the advertisement saying no evictions. Then below it, Lives Matter, right? With a black lady right there. What is this? Are they incorporating Black Lives Matter into evictions? Right? Well, this is what they're doing. They're stemming Black Lives Matter and inequality and inequity all as one, and they're then positioning the government as the solution for everybody, right? It's pretty sick. It's pretty disgusting what they're doing here. But this is one of the main reasons why I was mainly cautious of what's going on in the real estate space, what they're intending to do right now. They are trying to position everyone. It doesn't matter if you're black, yellow, purple, or green. Everyone down below, and then the government up top, and then basically all the money is going to flow down below, right? And the question is, what is this going to look like? Potentially, this could look like a large Section 8 program, but the Section 8 program can dictate and determine rents. Maybe the rents are lower, maybe they're higher. Who knows? Probably lower, right? All the new regulations, all the new restrictions, all of the new requirements. If you've ever ran a Section 8 property, you know there's certain things that you have to do. Just kind of like selling an FHA property. You have to meet certain guidelines, certain items. You have to hit certain boxes to be able to get your checks. Well, the same thing is going to be very, very true here, I believe, with what's going on. So take a look at this. They mainly position this as a must-do because we may have a new pandemic. This is what they're saying. And we have to protect ourselves from this new pandemic or a new potential problem that could impact housing and affordability, and we can't have people go homeless. Right? It's just unbelievable how this whole thing is just segueing slowly. But this is one of the big concerns that I've always had with real estate in this environment is just what happens next. It's the big question. I'm not concerned about the property valuations, even though a lot of people are saying, oh, prices are up here, prices are here, prices are too high. But if you know real estate, you understand value, you're not going to overpay for a property, you're going to understand the rules to the game, you're going to know what you can and can't do, and you're going to be able to position yourself accordingly. You'll be okay. If you don't know the rules to the game, you might overpay for a property, but this isn't a market for beginners, right? And so what we're seeing is that everyone is going to be soon a beginner because every rule is going to change, right? Look at all the pictures. All the pictures is them pushing this movement, right? Every picture, it's crazy. So look at this. With a sub-organization of poverty, we need to ask, how do we make these areas more flexible and responsive to the ways they can change? Experts and policymakers say they are not exactly sure what happens now. Federal funds are drying up, and most programs are no longer accepting new applications. Researchers are continuing to publish new reports on ERAP lessons learned. There is a consensus among housing leaders that the next year will be critical in determining whether all this pandemic-era knowledge is sustained and expanded upon or buried and forgotten. The National Low-Income Housing Coalition, an advocacy group, is focusing on rising eviction rates and the need to establish permanent emergency rental assistance programs, said Sarah Gallagher, the group's senior project director. We need it both for individuals in emergency situations because of personal crisis, as well as to prepare for another pandemic. If Congress was planning to reallocate new dollars, then local officials would work to invest in infrastructure and staff just like they do for other permanent housing programs. But at this point, communities don't know if they'll be using ERAP systems again or be forced to dismantle them. Meanwhile, HUD is now considering an eviction protection strategy and is beginning to think through how to start tracking eviction data nationally. In recent federal appropriation acts, Congress tasked the housing agency with considering the feasibility of developing some sort of national eviction database, and 3 bills have been introduced to increase federal analysis of evictions. I think you can make an extremely strong defense that investing in eviction prevention provides a positive economic and social return to this country, says Gene Sperling, the American Rescue Plan coordinator for the Biden administration. So even on that hard-headed basis, eviction strategy is the type of wise investment that people think of like quality preschool, especially when you consider the economic scarring, emotional trauma, and heartbreak these policies can prevent. The uncertainty surrounding future funding makes all this particularly confusing for local housing leaders. Right now, some communities are still distributing their ERAP funding, which doesn't expire until September 2025. Localities are tapping into remaining state and local funds to help sustain their programs. But these funding streams will eventually be gone. On the congressional level, there's a bill established a permanent emergency assistance program. When it's proposed $3 billion in annual funding is fairly low, housing advocates say passing legislation would be an important seed that could motivate the HUD to continue building on ERAP lessons. For now, though, passage looks unlikely. In the meantime, activists are fighting to press for broader reforms of the housing market, right? This is the big concern here, is these broad reforms on the housing market, how this whole thing is going to change. And that's why, I believe they're going to continue with this. As gas prices rise, as food prices rise, everything is going to continue going up. Who is going to be the main target of attack? That's the big question. If national rents are increasing about 18.5% over the last 12 months on average, right? The typical rent in America right now is $2,002 per month. The average income in America is about $40,000, right? You do the math. After you factor in taxes, 60% roughly of gross monthly income is going to rent. Who is going to be the main target towards these high gas prices, high food costs, and everyday cost of living? Who's going to be the target? It's going to be landlords, right? And what is the most valuable commodity? It's going to be resources, land, right? This is what they're doing. They're going to use every single movement that they possibly can to go after the landlords. That's why I think the next couple of years we're going to start to see very, very big battles for landlords. I'm not saying real estate's a bad investment. I think it's a great investment. But I think we need to all pay attention closely to what's happening because it's going to get very, very challenging out there. Gallagher suggested making ERAP recipients automatically eligible for other programs, though categorically eligibility, some of the households that receive ERAP are in need of longer-term subsidies, and now that households have been engaged, we don't just want to walk away, she said. We've already deemed them eligible. There should be a way of transmitting these folks additional resources using SelfEstation. Bailey from HUD noted it was her agency was at first encouraged Treasury to consider SelfEstation a strategy because the HUD knew from experience how hard it can be for homeless populations to receive government assistance when they lack certain documents. She acknowledged, though, that currently no HUD program, including even its own homeless assistance program, allowed for that flexibility. Some communities, like Philadelphia and Chicago, have used their ERAP dollars to bolster adjacent housing assistance efforts, like expanding access to lawyers for low-income tenants. This also is something very popular that's happening in a lot of big cities these days, is where tenants will get free legal assistance. And what this looks like is, let's say in a normal dispute, if you were to have a dispute with, let's say, your neighbor, and you both had to hire attorneys, you'd both be looking at hefty legal bills, and you would both probably be more likely to want to settle it outside of court without fighting it because the cost with these attorneys is going to be through the roof, right? So it's going to disincentivize you both to hire an attorney. However, now with what the states are doing is they're giving tenants free access to attorneys. So not only in many locations where was rent not due, they were also giving access to free attorneys for the tenants to defend themselves or to sue a landlord for harassment or anything that they chose to, right? And so the landlord would have to pay $300, $400 per hour to defend themselves or to move forward on an eviction, whereas the tenant would get no out-pocket cost. So I mean, this is all changing things in a very, very big way. Encouraging alternatives to evictions, and all this is also going to be factored into rent increases. So if you have one or two tenants that are, maybe legal bills that you have to come out of pocket for out of 20 doors or 30 apartments that you have, what are you going to do to the other 28 or 30 doors? You're going to increase rents to make up for the losses from those units. An eviction through so-called court diversion programs. The White House is encouraging these kinds of efforts, held at a summit on court diversion. In the summer of 2021, something Sperling said was done partially to accelerate a conversation around long-term eviction reform. long-term eviction reform. While federal funds certainly enabled Philadelphia and Chicago to run more successfully diversion programs, landlords are much more likely to agree to an eviction alternative if there's more money available to pay them rent. Local leaders say that they don't plan to abandon their diversion efforts even if ERAP dollars dry up. As our resources have diminished, we've tried a little more intentional and do a little more targeting, said Thomas of the Philadelphia Housing Development. We used $8 million of our ERAP funds to launch a right to counsel pilot because we want this to be not a one-time emergency measure, but to help create infrastructure that can be lasting. So get ready for this. This is going to come across all markets in America. It's going to be a very, very, very big change with land rights, housing rights, with what people think of as being a multifamily landlord. A lot of this is going to change. I think it's going to change very, very soon. But with this change could come opportunity. But as I always say, invest in things you really know. Invest in things you really understand. If there's something that you don't know the answer to, be cautious about investing your money until you get the answer to that question. With multifamily property, this is the big question mark for me. This is the one thing holding me back from wanting to run out there and invest in multifamily. Is I don't know what they're going to do next. I don't know what new laws they're going to try to move forward to combat inequality, as they would say. I don't know what they're going to do. And so for that, me locking myself into a 30-year loan or even a 5-year, 7-year arm on a multifamily property doesn't make sense for me to do it. And so for that, I'm going to hold off. I'm going to get the answers to these questions. I'm going to report back to you guys. If you want to know what's going on in real estate, you want to know what's going on in the economy, subscribe here. Also hit the like button. Subscribe to my second YouTube channel. It's going to be an interactive show and a podcast coming this upcoming week where people can call in. And I have a lot of people that have actually messaged me, landlords, people all over the country that have told me their stories. So I'm going to bring them on calls, and it's going to be really cool, really informative. Really looking forward to sharing everything that I learned with them. And subscribe on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. Everything's in the banner. And check out cashnow.video for if you want to get started on YouTube, real estate, or if you want to, if you need help with your credit. Again, I suggest investing in real estate when we figure out the answers to these questions. But real estate ultimately is something everyone should learn. They should really understand the rules to the game and really have a really good game plan, whether it be buying a multifamily property to rent out or buying a house to live in. So I'll see you guys in the next video.